All right, folks, I greet you. I am Citizen Jones Hussein, welcoming you, one and all, to another program in the series, Homo Politicus, on Enterprise TV. Well, it's a familiar terrain. We interrogate issues thrown up by the Nigerian Federation. Just so you know, today, President Bola Tinubu okays international diplomacy, open to talks with Guinea, Burkina Faso, and Mali. You know, in international diplomacy, you have turned conflict into cooperation. The military coups in Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali threatened the sub-regional, regional, political, and economic union, of course, you know, of 15 countries, collectively known as ECOWAS, that's the Economic Community of West African States. And so when in late January 2024, soldiers who seized power in 3 West African countries announced they pull out from the economic bloc, a resort to diplomacy was a viable option. President Bola Tinubu, who doubles as the chairman of ECOWAS, told an august gathering of African leaders at the 37th ordinary session of the African Union at Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. He was ready to work with ECOWAS member states to launch the African Central Bank on time, that's before 2028. Experience tells me that in diplomacy, dialogue and talk are the only guarantees of lasting peace. Today, my guest is a political and business analyst and a teacher. So let's meet and greet Kenneth Ikenwa. Kenneth, I greet you.
Good afternoon, sir. Thanks for having me on.
All right, then. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Citizen Jones.
So, President Bola Tinubu okays international diplomacy at this time. Are you surprised?
Well, I'm not surprised. I think the first approach has proven not to be too strategic. And so when a strategy fails, or when you get to a point of strategic inflection, you have to sit down, have another reflection, and think of how best you can bring all hands on the table, on the deck, so that we have more of integrating than having differences amongst each other. Yeah, we're all brothers, so we should all move together.
So we should jaw, as we say, and not war.
Well, let's jaw. Let's talk about how we can love one another despite our differences, rather than how we should make war with one another. In spite of those differences.
Ken, let's look at the 3 countries of Guinea, Burkina Faso, and Mali, all former French colonies in Africa. That the military seized power in those countries, does it tell you, as it tells me, that the French influence in Africa is waning?
Well, it's very easy to see what is happening and what has been happening. But most specifically, the incidences that took place in the last 2 years in some of these colonies, it's still pathetic that we have to refer to them as colonies, which means that ab initio, they probably were not really independent. But even as an academic, some of the things I began to read were quite amazing. To see that there were some post-independence contracts, some post-independence, requirements made of these colonies, and they were actually living under very, very draconian situations that would translate to them wanting to actually find a way out of it. So the interpretation of the interventions as they see it now is more of what they say is fight for liberation than a fight or to install their own ambitions as soldiers.
I've heard incongruous things like Africa was not properly colonized.
Interesting.
I'm sure you've heard things like that.
In fact, some people are asking for the recolonization of Africa, saying that since we're not able to, rule ourselves and make the best of our resources. But there's another story to that.
Yeah.
Maybe that will come up in the course of the conversation.
ECOWAS was founded by the General Gowon government, if you remember.
Exactly.
For a reason. As an economic bloc, have we achieved anything after many years of ECOWAS being in place?
We have achieved a lot. At least I have witnessed the fact that there is a lot of cooperation in terms of trade, bilateral trade, open borders for migration also. But the extent to which we have been able to control the migration or actually appropriate some of the benefits that ECOWAS should have brought in to us as a country and to other member states remains in question. It would bother on is Peter being robbed to pay Paul or vice versa, because you would see that for the most part, Nigeria seems to be bearing the most financial brunt of having to run ECOWAS, having to fund ECOWAS, having to raise an army in 1990 to go, keep peace somewhere in ECOMOG. But the question now is, if we have to do that now, it becomes a rhetoric. Is there peace in Nigeria for us to start, wanting to go out to keep peace or install peace in another country? These are questions that even cast rocks of aspersion on the benefits of ECOWAS, as it were.
All right. Let's come home to Nigeria. We're playing the big brother role in Africa.
Yes.
More so in the sub-region.
West Africa, yes.
We remain big brothers, aren't we?
Well, I like to speak in statistical terms. What's the definition of a big brother? Is it a big brother in terms of size of population? Is it a big brother in terms of size
you told me
of the territory?
We pick the bills.
Okay, so we're picking the bills in that wise because one,
we have the money.
We have the population, we have the market size, we have the infrastructure, and we seem to be funding some member states, giving out electricity, subsidizing fuel before the last regime or the last administration came in, and so much more. But if you look at other indicators, I do not think at this point in time we should take a pride in saying we're actually big brothers. We are just a unifying factor for the entire economic bloc for now.
Maybe playing catch up.
Well, I think we're in a state of transition for now. Things have gotten not too good, so that role of being a big brother, it doesn't come in for now.
Okay, we won't go to court over that. The idea was mooted to float the ECO as a unit of, transaction in the West African
single
region.
unit, yeah.
This is where the African Central Bank comes to mind. So President Tinubu taking this gamble at this time, you think it's auspicious?
An analysis of that would lead us into a dichotomy of possibilities and probabilities. If I speak on my own authority and my own perspectives, the differences, the language barriers, the multidimensional barriers we have, as people in a block with well over 1,000 different ethnic groups, different languages, different economic ideologies, as you see, is now coming up with the formation of the Alliance to the Sahel, the Alliance of Sahel states. The possibility of that coming into fruition by 2028, I really think it's not possible for now. And then when you look at the fact that almost globally now, most of even the top countries in the world are coming out to say there is a recession, I do not see the possibility of anybody focusing on integrating monetary-wise. Like you rightly said, it's a big gamble, but it's not something we should put behind us. It's something we should put ahead of us and possibly walk towards. But in 2028, I seriously doubt.
Too short?
Too short and not strategic.
4 years to go?
Too short, not strategic, because right now, most of the economies, even in the economic bloc, in the West African economic bloc, they are at the stage of recovery. There's no real economy now that can set to be in a boom. Now, our statisticians have not come out to tell us in Nigeria whether we're experiencing a recession or whether we're experiencing a depression, but we know we're having inflation almost to the tune of about 30%. We know we're having exchange rate volatility unprecedented in the history of the country. So at this point in time, I am very certain that President Tinubu will be much about having to fix his own country and build his own reputation back than having to go somewhere else to look after someone else's father's backyard, as we will say in colloquial terms.
Yeah, he was recently voted chairman of ECOWAS. You think it was one big gamble, Was it proper to have taken that office?
I would not speak for the retinue of advisors that actually advised the president, but I would have thought if I was in that council of advisors, going by what we are experiencing now as a country, if for such an appointment to have come, I would have just humbly advised him to not take that appointment, to focus on what was on ground. And so that it's on easy lines, the head that wears the crown. How much more a head that wears two crowns?
Ken is wearing the crown.
Yeah,
whether or not you like it.
He's already. That's what I'm saying. That if I was in those council of advisors,
you are not there.
I would, and I'm still saying that I would not have advised him to take that position. Rather, charity begins at home. Focus on the home front. Build back the home front. Put us back on that pedestal of greatness, of the greatest country in Africa, of the biggest, largest economy in Africa. Consolidate that position, and then you can have the flair for other things. I agree
more with you. You're familiar with the book, There Was a Country?
Oh, yes. The great Chinua Achebe.
Ken, there was a country in this country. There was. We can recover the country?
With what is on ground, if I have to be factual and truthful to the audience and to myself, we can recover that country, but not immediately. We need a new crop, a new breed of leaders, a new breed of intellectuals. We need a different type of technocracy that can, be fused into proper democracy. We need the Nigerian populace to be more educated. We don't need a populace that you give 20 naira, 2,000, a bag of salt before they go and vote. We don't need a populace that votes on the basis of ethnic, religious bigotry. We need an enlightened populace. And as we speak, the illiteracy level in the rate in Nigeria, I think, is about 55%. I think we can get closer to winning back and building back that country if we can drive down that illiteracy rate, if we can drive down the poverty rate, and if we can actually reform our criminal justice system. I don't see how we can build a country back.
As I always say, I'm wont to saying, if we punish wrongdoing in this country.
That's what I mean. You just took the words out of my mind, out of my mouth. If we need to reform the criminal justice system, a situation, this is a major contradiction, where an individual is found to have stolen about 50 billion, 100 billion, 190 billion, and he could just sit somewhere and say he's sick, or come to court in crutches and be let go, or do a plea bargain and never visits prison. And you find somebody, I read recently in the papers, that stole a cock and that has been remanded in prison, or that was sentenced for 2 years for stealing a cock. What kind of criminal justice system is that? How do you build back a country?
He should be killed.
So
you must be crazy.
That's it.
My country is richer than that. Okay, if you are just viewing in, this is Homo Politicus on Enterprise TV, and we're looking at the issue. President Bola Tinubu okays international diplomacy, open to talks with Guinea, Burkina Faso, and Mali. And my discussant today is Ken Ikenwa. We'll take this break. Please stay.
Enterprise TV, your one-stop shop for news, programs, human angle stories, the economy, sports, and much more. We go the extra mile to bring incredible details to you. So hop on the train now. Enterprise TV, a tradition of truth.
Okay then, folks, welcome back. President Bola Tinubu okays international diplomacy. Is open to talks with Guinea, Burkina Faso, and Mali. Of course, let's also tell you, President Bola Tinubu doubles as chairman of ECOWAS. He's already there. Many leaders in Africa will seek advice only after their minds are made up. Or so it would seem to me.
I think you're exact on that point. That's how it is. But we also need to look at the merits of why some decisions are taken by leaders. I like to look at things, I like to be a little bit dialectical in my views and analysis. I look at it from the right angle and from the left. It's also a good thing to have President Tinubu there because it's a soft marketing strategy. One, for himself, and two, for Nigeria. A kind of announcing that Nigeria is back, on the block, and that we're ready to take that role.
Although not with a bang.
Sorry, not with the bang, you said.
Not back with a bang.
Well,
Ken, I would have loved to see Nigeria in 2024 coming back with a bang. And why not?
A lot has gone down the drain. And going back to the great magnus opus of Chinua Achebe in Things Fall Apart, he said that how can I use spit to wash my hands when I have a river at my backyard? And I keep saying this all the time for people to get the message. And what does that mean? Nigeria is resource rich, but capital poor.
Yeah.
Nigeria is resource rich, but capital poor. On the basis of that, coming back with a bang is a contradiction.
By choice. We are poor by choice.
Should I say by choice? I beg to disagree with you. I would say by wrong leadership with wrong examples and by docile followership. That followership is beginning to get out of that docility and that ineptitude.
You think so?
Yes, because we're beginning to see pockets of people here and they're saying, we can't bear this anymore. But the question is,
we have been there.
How did they get there?
We had been there on October 20, 2020 during the SAP riots. No.
The NSAS movement.
We expected a momentum, but again, as we say, the youth lack restraint. Some going after gaining a mileage in the initial 2 days, we fell apart. Are you surprised at that?
Well, I'm not surprised. Let me also say my first degree was in sociology, so I do a lot of sociological analysis on these issues. You discover that the SARS movement was actually stratified. What do I mean? It actually seemed to have been focused on a particular segment of, the demographic of Nigeria that came out to voice out things. We didn't have people in their 60s, in their 70s, part of it. We didn't have possibly very, very young people. But now, what is going on in Nigeria cuts across all strata. I mean, I was somewhere yesterday, and these people, or this lady that was talking, is somebody you will know is a woman of means. Okay. But she came out to say, look, people should know that everybody is going through the heat in Nigeria. And the popular adage, or should I say mantra, the rich also cry, is now becoming a reality in Nigeria. That's a woman of means. So what is happening in Nigeria now is not specific to any one strata of the demography, distribution of the Nigerian population. Everybody seems to be affected, and we're feeling the heat. And even if you are not, you see people that are feeling it. You see, one young person. I was telling somebody jokingly, I said, look, area boys don't harass people anymore. They don't steal. Because the person you want to go and harass, as a citizen, that the person is living under invisible harassment. So what they do now, which I've experienced, they beg you, sir, I beg just something to eat. Bros, please, something. So there is hunger in the land. There is multidimensional poverty in the land. And I think my greatest fear is the fact that the leadership is not engaging the people. The leadership is not engaging the people. If we can turn around that equation of engagement, with the people, vis-a-vis the wrong perceptions and vis-a-vis also the right perceptions, I believe we can, the present administration could gain the empathy. But right now, there can't be any empathy.
Yeah.
Because how can there be empathy when some people are giving millions, billions, to purchase vehicles for themselves? How can there be empathy where the people see these things? The social media is agog. The person you think is illiterate is able to operate, some degree of social media and watch these videos, and they see how the nation is going. And I can categorically say that not a good number of people are happy, with the present situation.
There's a talk about paying a serious attention to opposition politics in Nigeria. Let's digress a little.
Yeah.
Labour Party seems to be the new kid on the block. As we speak, Labour Party is enmeshed in internal wranglings having to do with misappropriation and so on. Is that us?
Well, that's us.
Okay.
Let's be sincere.
Sadly.
That is us, sadly. I mean, as far back as 1950, the former Prime Minister, Tafawa Balewa, did say this about civil servants, about the state of the nation. And as of 1950, I think as a population, as a country, even as a colony, we were just a little bit under 60 million, 50 to 60 million,
50 or so
50 to 60 million thereabout. And he said it openly. I can't quote it verbatim, but he said, look, the public service is corrupt. He used a particular statement which I wish I could really bring back to my memory. He said it's a twin of bribery and corruption. It's I don't know.
Cynics like us will remove the C in civil.
Okay, I'd say
evil. Evil service.
Well, I'll pretend I did hear that because I am partially a public servant. So you are indicting us. I didn't come here to indict myself and my colleagues. But the fact remains that our society has been paralyzed, by this twin evil of bribery, of corruption, of the failure to ask questions. When I was growing up as a child, Citizen John, if I brought home a pen, that my parents didn't buy for me,
you were going to answer queries.
My mother would ask me, that, where did you get this pen? And if you couldn't explain, not only did you get a good spanking, you were made to go and return it.
Yeah.
But these days we find teenagers buying...
Ken, I found 5 shillings. It was a note in this country.
Back then.
When there was a country here. It was...
They still will be a country. We're coming.
Okay. I pretend I didn't hear that.
All right.
Okay.
So it's balanced now.
I took the 5 shillings home. My mother asked, where did you get it from? I said, on the floor. Where? Near the market. Return it. Don't you know that people get turned to chicken, to goats, and they're taken away?
No.
Ken, I never, since then, I'm talking about the early 50s, since then, I never found anything on the floor.
The reverse is the complete case in Nigeria today. We're living in Nigeria today where as a civil servant, you retire. And maybe you retire as a director of a particular parastatal or a particular NDA.
Maybe nothing to show for it?
No, it's not even that you don't have any show for it. It's that your people are expecting that you have something to show for it. And so if you come back to the village without having something to show for the 30 years you spent in the civil service, your people will name shame you. Your people will address shame you. They will say, that house where that man retire, where if you do anything for people.
The problem is from the people, from us.
You are not incorrect if you say that.
The problem
you are
is
not
from
incorrect
us.
if you say that. We have a people problem in as much as we have a leadership problem. But I think we are evolving, and I'm sure we'll be able to bridge that gap.
But this society throws up this leadership you are talking about. This same society.
That's a theory. That's a theory. In a country where the poverty rate is very high, how do you expect the people to think strategically? In a country where the illiteracy rate is very high, how do you expect the people to think strategically? In a country where...
How do I expect such a country to produce the right leadership? How do I?
There will always be that leftover group. There will always be that little beautiful bride. There will always be the beautiful ones that are not yet born, that will be born, that will take the center stage at some point in time. I don't know if it will be in our generation, but I think that in our lifetime, I hope it will be, but I think that army, is growing, is coming. That army is uncorruptible. That army is morally upright. That army, they have platforms that are different from platforms that could be hijacked in those days. It's not the kind of platform you can use Decree 4 to detain. I'm sure, Citizen John, you would be familiar with Decree 4. Oh, yeah. But let's not go back there. Yeah, but those platforms are emerging, and it is in tandem with how far and how fast we are evolving.
But a cynic once said, knowing the right things to do and not do them is the worst form of cowardice.
Okay.
So they say when men and mountains meet, great things are done. We have met this mountain a number of times. We are refusing to do great things. So now let's begin to take this discussion home. President is reaching out to the African Union. In 2024 and beyond, we can be great again. That's the message. How do we begin to take the message of that? The president okays international diplomacy, is open to talks with Guinea, Burkina Faso, and Mali.
All right. I try to be very unbiased in my analysis. In my analysis by paralysis or by paralysis which leads to analysis.
Either or, yeah.
Whichever, the same biases flows. When I see something good that an individual does, I try to give the credit.
Okay.
And when I see something awful that you have done, irrespective of whether you're president or whether you are whatever it is that time and chance has given the opportunity to occupy, I would say it with a lot of decorum. When I listen to the president's speech, and we know these things, how some of the speeches are written, at the United Nations General Assembly, the 78th one for last year, I was happy. I don't need to share my differences. I don't need to love the individual that is speaking. I don't also dislike him. But
more like retaining the message.
I wanted to look at the message and just
leave the messenger alone.
Leave the messenger alone.
Okay.
What I saw in that message was a message of Pan-Africanism. And in that speech, it was said somewhere, I listened to it over 3 times, that Africa is not begging. And I think it's time we begin to re-echo that across the nooks and crannies of Africa, that Africa is about the largest, the biggest, richest, resource-rich continent in the world. Everybody is here.
I won't pretend you don't know. You know already. The richest spot on the planet is in Africa.
Every
DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Yes.
The richest spot.
Everybody is here. Every meaningful country is here, exploiting, exploring, excavating,
lamentably,
degenerating.
Okay, by choice.
Well, by cooperation of a selective few that are privileged in society. We saw these things 400 years ago. A selective few of the elders sold our ancestors out on slavery for mirror, for a bottle of gin, imported gin, for hands, for kissing. It's still the same thing. It's still the same thing.
Called long juju of Arochoko. Listen, Amiro.
Educate me.
Now, Miro, because the story is simply that before that time, the African man never saw a mirror.
Never saw an image of himself. Yeah.
So he saw, when you were taken to Aruchuku, that was a major slave outpost.
Yes, definitely.
You are pushed into this room, confronted by a mirror of you. And then you shouted, "My God," in your dialect. They say Ibritam, which was the supposed juju that Ibritam don't chop you. And you were sold into slavery. So
it's the same meal all over again.
You think we are recovering?
We are capable of effectively organizing ourselves for recovery.
Yeah,
that's what I would say. We are capable of that, and I think we should come back to the classroom and come back to mathematics and build a calculus around this. In calculus, we talk about differentiation and integration. I think the problem in Africa and the problem with Nigeria is that we lay too much emphasis on the things, on our differences, on our differentials, than on things that are supposed to integrate us as a people.
Yeah.
So, and this has been masterminded as far back as 1914, as far back as 1814, when there was a scramble for Africa, and the Spanish came. I think they left and took over more of Latin America. The British came. The Germans were here at one point in time. The Italians, I think, did something with Libya and tried to colonize Ethiopia.
The Irish came too.
The Irish, so that has reinforced, those lines of differences, those lines of, differentiation rather than integration. If we can bridge that gap and speak with one language, in Swahili, it's called Ubuntu. If we can speak with one language of collectivism, let's think as a unit, let's think as a race, let's think as a people, let's integrate. That's where I think I fancy the idea of having the African Central Bank. Let's do more trade between ourselves than do trade with external bodies who would have their own economies closed, they practice mercantilism, but expect that whatever they bring into Africa, you should open your borders and you sell at the price they want to buy. And this is what these chaps in Niger, in Burkina Faso, in Mali, and Guinea have set out to redefine. They have redefined that calculus, and they have said, we are taking control of our destiny, of our resources, and even though it's going to be rough in the beginning, I'm sure we can do better. And I'm sure we'll get to that stage of in this conversation.
Okay, the index finger of the producer is asking us to wind up. But let me thank you for a robust chat. Ken, you'll come again, won't you?
Definitely. Thanks for having me on.
All right.
It's a great privilege to be sitting in front of a legend, a living legend.
Can you spell it? All right, so that will just about do it. Ken Ikenwa is a teacher, as I told you. He's a political analyst, business analyst at the same time. We just broached the subject of the President, Bola Tinubu of Nigeria, okaying international diplomacy. He says he's open to talks with Guinea, Burkina Faso, and Mali, and why not? That will just about do it, as I said. We'll be here the next time. Bye-bye now.
Enterprise TV, a tradition of truth.